Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and I'm joined by my assistant, Desta Barnabe, who's my editor and co-author, and who's actually read all the books, which I haven't done. And she's in the eastern part of Canada. I'm on the west coast here, and we're joined today by Joshua Golembeske,
Nice.
Beske, and he's the senior director of production at Gaia. And we've had some contacts with Gaia. It's the world's largest consciousness streaming service with over 10,000 videos reaching members in 185 countries. Joshua also serves as guest host of the show Cosmic Disclosure, available to stream at Gaia.com. Gaia is dubbed as the spiritual Netflix by Parade, is the largest conscious streaming platform with 10,000 award-winning original series, films, documentaries, reaching nearly 100 million subscribers in 185 countries. Can you believe that, Desta? 100 million subscribers. That's more than we got. And so we got Gaia's mission is to unite the global consciousness community and features the world's best experts for spirituality, wellness, and personal growth, ranging from Deepak Chopra to Joe Dispenza and his neuroscience-backed meditation. So welcome, Joshua, and you have a massive background in terms of stuff that Desta and I are interested. Desta and I have both, I think, gone through the UFO thing, and we do a lot of paranormal, not paranormal stuff, but a lot of consciousness stuff, believing that this is where we're going to solve the problem. And I noticed that you also have mentioned that experiences are very important, that you have to talk to the people who are engaging the phenomena, and that the other stuff will prove that the phenomena it may be real, but it really doesn't get you anywhere. It's sort of just like stories. So let's talk a little bit about your personal experience in terms of your background and the experience that you had, your UFO experience, because you talk in the interviews that I listen to about this phenomena that I talk about an awful lot, where people sort of go down the rabbit hole, where when you have an experience, you can't let it go, and your wife thinks you're crazy, and also people run into trouble. So talk about your background and how you ended up going through the different types of production all the way up to now working at Gaia for a number of years.
Will do. First of all, thank you for having me on, Grant. I followed your work for a long time. I love your
Yeah.
work, buddy. You're a big influence on me. And great job pronouncing my last name, Golembeske. I couldn't spell it to the second grade. It's quite the doozy. So I'm happy to be here. And yeah, I'm basically full-time UFO now with my work and life, but it didn't start that way. And like a lot of people in our space, Grant, we all have a personal story that kind of led us, that unlocked this journey for us. And mine kind of started in two ways. One was an actual event, and also there was an intergenerational farmhouse that had all this quote unquote haunting in it that later in life I realized was probably ET related. But let me start with the event that happened in my childhood that really sparked this interest. So I grew up in this sleepy, quintessential town in Rhode Island called Little Compton. It's right on the coast. And one summer, it was 92. It was, I forget exactly, it was either sixth or seventh grade for me. This one summer, a lot went down. But the big event, I remember it clear as day. It was all over the papers and everyone talked about it. I was in my backyard and I was playing with my pet guinea pig that we called Guinea Guy because we weren't very creative with names for some odd reason. So I was outside with Guinea Guy, letting him run in the grass. My dad was fixing this stone, like outdoor cooking thing. And my neighbor, who like worked in his garage all day, ran over all excited with a police receiver in his hand. And he liked to listen to the police all day for whatever reason. And he was like, "Oh my God, they're chasing a UFO. They're chasing a UFO. And they're asking to come into Little Compton, the neighboring, like, it was like two towns over had been chasing this UFO. And they were just asking permission or alerting like the town authorities that they're coming through." And my house was kind of on the edge of town. So all of a sudden, we were like, what's going on? And then, boom, right over our head, like something went over us. We all look up, missed it, but there was like a shadow over us. And we were like, what was that? Moments later, police cars came ripping up our road, like going 100 miles an hour, chasing it, and sirens and everything, moving down to the town. We were like, what is happening right now? They chased it to the edge. All I saw was a quick shadow, so it wasn't that big of an event for me. But they chased it all the way to the edge of the ocean. The UFO, silver disc, disappeared over the ocean. A bunch of people reported the same shape, classic ufology, silver disc, seamless. Didn't seem, no one reported rivets or anything like that. And it went over all these different towns and then just disappeared into the ocean. Not into the ocean, just out into the horizon. And that was kind of just the event that kind of sparked me like, okay, what's going on? That was pretty wild. Of course, no one believed us, even though it was all over the papers and the police were chasing it. It was like everyone thought we were silly because the stigma, we know the legacy program has done a good job making us all think it's silly and being scared of it. So something we talked about in the family, but not so much like until I was older, really sharing it with people. But that was kind of like the moment that unlocked my mind to being like, there's something going on here. I'm really into this. I was already kind of into the books and documentaries. I was reading everything, even as a young kid, everything from Communion to everything that was out at that time. And so I was already into it a little bit. That opened me up. Now, nothing happened. I wasn't abducted or I didn't have missing time. This was clearly just like a sighting that was unrelated to me, and it was just flying low over the town, and all these people saw it. But the big thing that really, the reason why I am where I am today as the head of production for Gaia and the co-host of Cosmic Disclosure is because of my family. And as you probably know, a lot of contact is generational. And my family is no exception to that. And that's probably why I'm really obsessed with it, less about that one early sighting. And I've had another UFO sighting. I've actually held a UFO. We can get to that in a second too. But that was later in life. So generationally, though, this all starts with it's more my mom's side. She's Irish, and her grandmother, my great grandmother, it started with, there was always this famous story where this UFO in Michigan flew right over her car on a road. Her car went dead. She had missing time. It was like a classic UFO story involving a giant ship with lots of lights. We didn't know the shape. She just said that something came over, the car stopped, and then she had missing time. We don't know what happened. And it was one of these stories that like just kind of the family kept alive. And we didn't really think much of it. But the house that my mom lives in today, is in Little Compton, and my grandmother lived there, and we had multiple generations. And when my mom was growing up there, all this weird stuff happened, and it continued through her adult life. At first, I thought it was a haunting. It was like, oh, we're seeing ghosts, we're seeing shadow people, we're hearing like time slips. Like there's this one room, and I've heard this too when I go home, where it sounds like people are almost like playing cards and having fun in like the 1800s, which makes sense because that's when it was built. And it's kind of nice, actually. It wasn't haunting to me, but my aunts actually will not sleep in the house. My mom's still there because when they were kids, they had classic ghosts and shadow people experiences in the house that scared the living daylights out of them. I almost swore. I don't know if this is a podcast where I can swear, but I caught myself there. And like, so they won't sleep there. Literally like classic shadow people with red eyes, which I think is more ET now. The ghost, the guy who built the place, the captain, who was a famous whaler out of New Bedford, Massachusetts, who built the place. We see they've seen him multiple times. And then there was also footsteps, classic ghost stuff. So growing up, you're like, okay, maybe this was a haunted house. Ooh, that's fun and interesting. I actually think something else is going on. I think it was contact. And as you know, like these membranes open up and it seems like Skinwalker Ranch where like other things happen that might not be related to the ETs. It's just other things are able to come through. It became a hotspot for ghosts and other things just to pass through. But my mom has had classic ET experiences, like waking up, three gray aliens by her bed or in the window looking at her, terrified, and then suddenly being like, oh, this is totally fine, and laying back down in bed and then just not remembering what happened. She's had multiple examples of that. I have an aunt who I talked to extensively to Whitley Strieber about, actually, who has psychic gifts. And it seems like at first we were like, oh, she's just psychic. She sees dead people, which is like, she's like the real life version of Harry Joel Osment from The Sixth Sense. Like that's a real thing. In her mind's eye or literally a physical apparition she'll see, and we'll give her a mission to go do something. And I first was like, that was just unrelated to everything, right? She just has this ability. But now I'm thinking, as I go deeper and deeper into research into experiencers, we know that experiencers unlock psychic gifts. And my theory now is that my family is dealing with a generational contact experience, but not like, this is where it gets confusing for people, because like not everyone's the Michael Jordan of contact. Like you got the Chris Bledsoes and the Whitley Stribers who remember so much, right? But I think most people are a lot more like my family, a couple fragmented memories. It kind of makes sense when you look at it, or even less. And that's what my family's going through. And I've been hyper obsessed since I was a kid, since those incidents, all the way up today where I made my career like full-time UFO. I can't help but think about it all the time. It's like I've been like, I don't know, like it's like a common trait within the experiencer community, being hyper focused on it. I'm not saying I'm an experiencer. I don't know. I've had some weird moments that we'll get into a little further in this podcast, but I'm just going to stop there because I'll just rant forever, Grant. And I think with you and me and the way we talk, we could just fill this podcast with 10,000 words. But I think I answered your question. I'll pause there so you can ask another one because I'll just keep
Yeah.
going.
Okay, I'll just ask one. I see Desta is laughing. She had the same sort of experiences, so she can get a question. I just want to get in one about
Yep.
when I had my experience in 1975. The second night, it came right at me, and the first night it flew right in front of the car. And as it was flying away, I was going like, "What's it doing?" And so my question to you is, what do you think the first one was doing? Do you think, or let's go to the question that oh, I forgot to get his name, the owl guy, Mike Cleland always says, on a
Right.
on a scale of 0 to 10, what do you think your sense of mission is?
Oh, 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a
And
10,
and
dude. I
that's the
can't
whole
help
thing.
it.
It's like it dragged you in, even though you didn't see anything.
Mhm.
Do you think that you are intended to do what you're doing in terms of getting out whatever message they want, or they just trigger you? Because I call it the theory of wow. They're not really doing anything. Like if they get your mother, they wake up your mother and say, wake up," and then you look and they're, I'm an evil alien, it's by your bed.
Yeah.
And then what do the people do? Everybody says the same thing. What do you do? Oh, I pulled the covers over my head, went to sleep. It's like, come on, you went
Right.
to sleep. So
Yeah.
what do you think is actually going on? Do you think this is you're part of a mission? Because you're into Michael Newton, so you know this idea that before you come into the world, there's this good possibility that you decide, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that,
Mhm.
and something happens to trigger you. It's like they send you a message, somebody's wearing a brooch, and when you see the brooch, you know you got to meet this woman, and it's part of the thing, and everybody's playing this little role like a
Yeah.
Shakespearean stage. And so I want to question your mind. Well, what do you think is actually going on in terms of these beings and what they're doing?
I think, yeah, I mean, I can't prove it, but I think I've been guided to communicate about the phenomenon. Like what I'm really good at is video producing, editing, and getting the message out there from a host producing, editing standpoint. And I think that my entire life was destined to do that. I feel a calling to it. I can't prove it. I almost feel burdened by it. Where like it's like I could have had a normal life, Grant. Like I went to
Yeah.
college for psychology and biology. I could have got a doctor or a psychiatrist. I could have done something. And instead, I was like, I'm going to TV. And I want to, and the reason why I went to TV is because I was like, in psychology, I was like, I can't just concentrate on paranormal stuff. I won't make any money. And I like biology, but like, I don't know. I want to, know about the biology of an ET. So like, I threw that all away to go to TV to get to where I am today. I don't have like, I never got a download or a message, but like with everything going on in my family, I don't think the ETs need to with me. They're like, he gets it. Like he's helping, he's pushing like crazy. And here I am today. I mean, I've had other UFO experiences that helped guide me. It felt like in my 30s, before I came to Gaia about 10 years ago, I had a UFO event from that same farmhouse with my wife, who didn't believe at first. She just thought I was into it. And this is before I went really hardcore into it. And we were in the farmhouse, which is really interesting that I had a UFO sighting from the generational farmhouse. Upstairs bathroom, looking out the window, giant orb in the sky. Couldn't tell how far away it was. First, I looked at it and I was like, I don't know. Maybe it's a helicopter coming at us. Maybe there's military bases generally in that direction north of the farmhouse, somewhere in the north in Maine. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay. And then it suddenly changed into Christmas tree color lights, like classic Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Spielberg, and jumped in the sky like erratically. And like would be over here, then over there, then back to the middle, then over there, then over there, and then it slammed back in the middle and just went straight up into space, not towards me, not away. You could tell. And my wife was like, "Holy cow!" That moment, you could argue, really sparked me because at that point I was editing and producing reality TV in Los Angeles, actively dumbing down America. That's what I like to tell people. Like I worked on some of the most salacious stuff, like Bad Girls Club, which is just the real world, but with just only women in a house. And that show was as trashy as it gets. Kind of fun to edit, really addicting to watch. I'm not anti anyone who watches that stuff because I still watch some of that stuff. But like when you work on it for years and years and years, your soul dies and you really feel like something's wrong. I dealt with depression. I dealt with all these issues in my 30s. And then all of a sudden I was like, no, my mission is to do that. I saw an ad for Gaia. I was like, I have to work there. I don't even know what this is about. I saw George Norrie doing Beyond Belief. And I was like, I don't even care what they're doing. I know that's a place that's taking UFO seriously and not just taking it seriously, but connecting it to consciousness, which I know we're going to go to, which is really what I want to talk about. Like nuts and bolts ufology is interesting and I love it. And I love knowing what government program and who's doing what and what senator said what. That's all great stuff. But like, I totally disagree with all the people out there who says we got to lead with that. I think that the more people would be interested in it if we got into consciousness and spirituality. But I'll hold off on that. So that event in the farmhouse led me to where I am today, and in some way, I feel guided by that. It's almost like they show you just enough to keep you going. You know, like you almost wonder if like they landed and they got out of the craft and they walked up to me and they were like, "Thanks, Josh, for helping get the word out," that I wouldn't do it or something. Like it's almost like they have to tease me. And I don't like saying that, but it feels that way.
Yeah, yeah. And especially when you described that was what I saw the second night was the thing jumping around the sky. And I remember some girl was there and she couldn't see it because it was jumping around. She's crying, I can't see it, I can't see it. And it, everybody's just ignoring the one guy's unloading this camera and people are swearing and yelling and stuff like that. And it's like the question that they often ask is, so do you think it saw you? Like it was sitting there and then you're watching it and all of a sudden it starts to jump around, almost like, watch this, and it just sort of
Yeah.
drags you in. So I'll turn to Desta, and sort of came down the same road as you. And I'm always proud of her now when I heard the story that she wouldn't drown the rat and got kicked out of her zoology degree, because she wouldn't drown the rat. And so she went from zoology and science into writing UFO books. And so I'll turn it over to her.
Great.
Well, I had a couple of questions, but now that we're I'll keep on topic a little bit. And now that we're talking about like um, Michael Newton and maybe the reincarnation aspect of the whole entire thing, what do you think
Mhm.
about like soul groups or soul families or people that you were maybe incarnated in this life, knowing friends and family and stuff like that? What do you think about that concept and how it relates to either the path you're on right now or the family that you have or the experiences like the ET experiences that you've had?
Oh, I resonate with Michael Newton in the soul pod thing very much. That is really interesting, and I do feel like that is real. How it relates to UFOs in my life is one of the things you get into. The more you get into UFOs and consciousness, the deeper you get into experiencers, it always leads to the nature of the universe, consciousness, and then reincarnation. If you get deep into any of these people, like especially the people, that Dr. John Mack worked with, or Bud Hopkins or anyone, well, he was a little more fear-based. He didn't really get into that as much. Once they unlock that fear and they really get over like the reproductive biology part of it, which is frightening, and they're able to like kind of think what really happened, they get shown doorways to the other side. They get taught information that like is like no one else gets. And then it gets into the soul cycle of how we reincarnate all together. People remember the beings through multiple lifetimes, usually at their death scene, which is fascinating. The same being. It's almost like these beings are like guardian angels. There's a reason why people call them angels. Almost like I just like three different guys I've talked to recently, like special forces guys, talk about them being angelic, like the loving presence they give. But back to reincarnation, it seems like there's a connection between ETs, the afterlife, and reincarnation. And it's consistently said throughout a lot of these experiencers. How I feel about it, I don't have proof, but I resonate so hard with that. Like my whole life, I've been searching for meaning. Like I rejected mainstream religion as a kid because it didn't feel right to me. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I just was like, that's not for me. Something feels like it's not, the lens isn't correct. But then once I started getting to John Mack's work, who's my number one influence, by the way, Dr. John Mack, it made sense to me. I was like, this feels like what's going on. Of course, the universe is way more complicated and way more beautiful than we realize. And of course, the phenomenon, which is pumped out at us like it's some sort of evil bad thing by the legacy program, which is just getting ridiculous. Like the whole stigma needs to go away. They won. They did a great job, making us feel this way about it. It's way deeper. It's way more interesting. And that's what I want to talk about. And I think more people would be into this subject if they knew that's where it was going. I think it's been like a farce, honestly. Like it's almost part of the psychological operation from the legacy program to make us be like, nope, nuts and bolts only. Don't bring up that stuff. No one's going to believe it. I'm like, that's BS. How many people are religious and spiritual in this world? That's way more important. So if you framed it that way, I feel like it would be further along. But I could be wrong. I'm ranting because I'm more of a UFO advocate than I am anything else. And I just feel like there's certain things people say in a room where it sounds smart, like, oh, we should only focus on government, experiencers or government pilots seeing stuff. I'm like, we've already done that. Like, that's been going on forever. Like, it didn't move the needle. It's not moving the needle at all. Like, people like Chris Bledsoe can move the needle. You know how many people he's inspired? I know he's a controversial figure to some people, but I love the man. Like, I think it's great. I want to lean more into that. And every time I bring up those stories at cocktail parties where I get made fun of, they always go better. People love hearing that. You know what I mean? Except for a couple people who are definitely like still really like they're self-defenders of the status quo and they don't even realize it. I know I'm on a rant right now, but I just want to finish it with this. Like, I find it fascinating that people will just immediately attack you and offend you and insult you if you bring up a UFO story, but they wouldn't do that for anything else. You could say I'm a paganist, I'm in some wild, wacky religion, and they won't
Yeah.
say anything. They'll respect you. But for some reason in their head, they're like, I'm going to attack you for being into UFOs. That's the Legacy program. They did an amazing job of making you fear it and ridicule it. It's a super powerful mass psychology technique. They did a really good job. I got to hand it to them.
And it
I
would
think
be
I
men.
answered your
I was
question. I
just
went on a
writing up
wild
last
rant.
night. Skeptic magazine poll: 90% of the readers of Skeptic magazine are men. They're because they want to be rational, analytical. Don't give me that woo-woo religious stuff and crystals and all that sort of stuff. I remember even I used to walk through conferences. Everybody thinks at a conference you're sitting there looking at UFO photographs. And as you said, it always comes down to these conversations: is, what is God? What's going on here? It's like it always
Yeah.
goes to these philosophical conversations. And I used to walk through the room. They have the big display room, and I'd walk and I'd look the other way, and the crystals are all on this side, and I'm turning the other way as if I don't want to get dragged into that stuff. And now
Yeah, yeah.
here I am. And
Yeah.
as you said, like you start to see these things, and this is a pattern. Desta and I are writing a couple books on this kind of stuff. The patterns where I did the one with the sky pilots, where I didn't realize until after the book was finished, when Jim Semivan, who's the equivalent of a two-star general at the CIA,
Mhm.
he's asked, was there telepathy when these beings were in the room with you? And he said, that was the weirdest part. He said, there was this being behind me. I don't know who it was. And suddenly I start to realize there's a bunch of people who tell the story about they're in the craft and somebody's behind them telling them what to do, and they're not allowed to turn around and look. And he said, this being
Yes.
behind me, and it had
Yes.
this guardian type thing going on about it. So I asked James Ian Dolly, the guy who was interviewing, ask him which side was it on? Because Michael Newton, if you realize Michael Newton, when you go in front of the council, your guardian angel stands behind you on the left hand side. So here was Jeff
Oh,
Singban saying there
wow.
was this guardian type. You had this guardian type thing going on about it, and yet he's very negative about the beings or whatever. So then I realized there are a bunch of people that said this. There was people behind him. So I went to Whitley Strieber and I said, Whitley, you've been on the craft a number of times. He said, yeah. I said, has you ever had chance when somebody was standing behind you and you weren't allowed to look and they were telling you what to do? And he said, all the time. He said, I told you I was going to steal the craft. I wanted to steal the craft. And this person behind me started laughing telepathically. So, that's the thing where you get this spiritual overlap that comes in. So I'll again turn it back to Desta because she's has had a lot of questions.
Oh, well, I could. Okay, so I just wanted to know about. I heard one of your podcasts before, so I know what you think about this. But what do you think some of the top either experiences or stories that you've heard since you've been working with Guy or your friends or whatever? What are some of the top things that you've heard that have made you conclude that you think that the beings are benevolent?
Oh, great loaded question. I love this. I love it. Okay, where do I start with this? One, I think that the media has done a good job, like I said, of making you fear it. But when you really talk to some experiencers, know there's definitely people who only have negative. But I'm going to go back to the work of John Mack. That's where it starts for me. Once you get over the shamanic initiation of the fear, which might be almost on purpose, because if you take psychedelics or you go through a shamanic initiation, that's part of it. It breaks you open. It breaks open your spirit. And then you're able to like take in, you have to surrender. You almost have to die. In the experience of a UFO contact, it's almost like they die first. The fear is unbelievable. And then afterwards, they open up and they realize these beings are trying to help them. They're healing them. Healings are wildly underreported. We always talk about the negative stuff, but like no one puts that in the books. Preston Dennett does a great job with that actually in his books and bringing up like they're healing people all the time. But what I think is going on is that specifically through the abduction experience is that your body remembers that. You're going to remember the part where you were forced on the table and you couldn't move and they were doing something medical to you. I think you just remember that because the fear-based, it's like it's biology, honestly. And that's why that memory surfaces first. But then John Mack was able to get a lot of people through that. And once they got through that, every time it was a wild transformational experience where they were like, these are my guardian angels. They love me. I've been with them through multiple lifetimes. They're helping me. They've been here all along. They're slowly guiding me. All of that is there. And if you get into like even the military cases, like what's his name? Wygant, the guy that Greer brought forward. I just did a video on him online. I mean, he walked up to the ship. All the fear was the humans. The humans were like, get out of here. We're gonna arrest you. We're gonna throw you in jail. Don't talk about this. But he had a telepathic connection with the being, and it felt like pure love. just like Jacob Barber said in his interview with News Nation, just like I interviewed Mike Batista recently and his connection. He felt familiar with him. And yeah, he did remember being on a table. But once he unlocked more memories, he was like, there's way more going on here. They're taking me to ships underground and seeing if I can open them. It's like all there when you look. It's just the media has made the masses fear it with these hardcore invasion movies, which I'll be honest, I love. I love Independence Day. It's fun to watch. I'm not against any of that stuff, just to be clear, folks. But my favorite movies are Contact, Arrival, to name two, like on my top tens. Those are more realistic to me. That's what's going on. It's way more poetic. So I think to answer your question about benevolent, I think the evidence actually says they are. And if you get into the Free Foundation study by Edgar Mitchell, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. It's just a survey, so it's not scientific fact. But look at all the experiencers. It's like wildly overwhelming to be positive. So the evidence is there. I'm not saying this just because I want aliens to be friendly and Josh likes them. Like, no, they are. And like in the fear-based propaganda, I worry. I don't think I'm on like 100% team Dr. Greer when it comes to like all the abductions are fake. I don't know if I'm there. He's really convinced of that. I think it's probably Israel. I just think people are misinterpreting it because they're only remembering the negative.
Yeah. Again, I want to just make a comment and I'll give it back to Desta to ask another question because you keep hitting on these things. Desta and I wrote a book called Contact Modalities, and we went through this whole thing about the trauma that people look at good and bad events, and trauma is a bad event, and trauma is actually the good event. That's what they want to. They want you to surrender. And that's why I say, why do they wake you
Yes.
up when you're in the bed? Because they want to scare the living daylights. And then they go, okay, he's ready to go now. Let's go. And then you're floating through the wall. They disassociate. You can pull your astral body or whatever and move through. And what we found with when we did the contact modalities, all the people who had these abilities to psychic and mediumship and all this kind of stuff that we found in the 70 different types of contacts that we were looking at, or people who had these abilities, different types of abilities, we found trauma was always a big part of it. And I remember I was with Sid Goldberg and we were in Toronto, and when I first discovered this, I said, Sid, I think there's every single time there's a trauma event, and what they're trying to do is get you to dissociate, and so they scared the daylights out of you or whatever, and they dissociate. And he's, nah, I don't think so. And we were sitting there talking, and this girl, her name is Osi, comes up, and she's got these photographs. She shows them to Sid, and Sid's looking at these photographs, and he says, "Oh, it just looks like a spider web on the camera. It picked up. It was a surveillance camera. It picked up this object moving around the car in the garage." And he said, "No, I just think it's a spider web." And so he was sort of going. I said, "Hey, Osi, you're a medium." She said, "Yeah, I'm a medium, a good medium." I said, "Let me ask you a question." And he said, "What? How was your childhood?" She says, "Oh, it's terrible. It's sexual harassment and physical and psychological. It was just absolutely terrible." And I turned to Sid and I said, "I told you." And he goes, he's looking at me. So the next experiencer walks
Yeah.
into the bar. Sid says, "Ask him." So, it's this whole deal. And Desta and I discovered this too, this whole thing about trauma, that this is part of the experience, that it starts very traumatic. And once the person surrenders, like I did did my 27 psychedelic experience, I had a couple really bad ones. Once you surrender, it's over. It's like but you got to surrender. And that's the key part of the mystery. So I'll turn it back to Desta for another question.
That's amazing.
Oh, or do you want to say something about that, Josh?
Oh no, I just said that's amazing. That's all. I
Oh.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could go on and on about all that in dissociation and trauma and stuff, and that's a big thing that Grant and I are always talking about and wondering about. But to
Well, that
lighten
would be
that
part
up.
of your book, right?
Well, and I was going to say that I know you've talked to Jake Barber, or you were talking about Jake Barber and the psionic, some of the psionic assets in the Skywatcher program. So I know you know about that.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I just wrote a book about the GATE program, about that gifted and talented education program. And that's kind of the main theory, is that since so many of us can't, I know that people like Jay Jordan Jozak have a
Oh yeah.
real
Yeah, yeah.
story about
Yeah.
real trauma, and Whitley's story about
Mm.
trauma was so traumatic to him that he was hospitalized after his event. So I know that a lot of people have the memory of trauma as well associated with it, except for the GATE program. What I found is that a lot of people just have no memory of it. But the like maybe theory, the main theory in my book, is that there was a dissociative event. So whether it was because we were listening to those tones, it could have been the gateway process or something, and they were trying to shift us out, like trying to give us some kind of dissociation, because the government had linked, before in the MK Ultra program, had linked ESP and psychic abilities experiences to dissociative events. So my theory kind of is that maybe that's what it was, listening to that gateway process where they're using binaural beats to kind of get you out of your body, was maybe not traumatizing, but it was so disorienting, because it was making a child, a 6 or 7 year old, like leave its body and maybe see some kind of crazy things, whatever we were doing. The trauma is still part of the question for the gate experience. So the gateway program, or the
Right,
gate,
there's a
sorry, the
parallel.
gate kids that were in the gifted and talented education program. So I definitely think that trauma has something to do with it. I always thought I didn't have any trauma in my childhood until I started looking into the gate school and the program that I was in as well. So I definitely think that
You were in the
that's,
Gateway program?
yeah, in the gate. Yeah, I was in gate in Canada here. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so I
I don't
was
know, say
really
sorry
interested.
or congratulations or just wow, that's wild. I don't know what to
Yeah.
say there.
Well, it's interesting because that trauma and the dissociative event is such a big part of it. And so maybe linked to that, my question will be, when you're talking about John Mack and like some of these things where he's saying like the awakening experience kind of is like really quickened by a contact experience. So it's like
Mhm.
fast tracked way to get to an awakening state is by this contact experience. So maybe linking that kind of to dissociation or to something like that. What is your explanation, or what do you think about that?
Wow, I think, well, I never made the connection between like these government programs that are doing similar things that the ETs are doing. That's so fascinating. You actually wonder if like they learned that from the ETs. You know what I mean? Like, how do they get to that conclusion to break people's minds open? Though it feels a little more like evil or selfish, these gateway programs, but the ETs seem to have like a greater purpose for it. So it feels better. I'm not saying either one's good. People have traumatic experiences with both. I'm just saying like that is so fascinating. It's like our nervous system has something to do with it. Our parasympathetic nervous system has to be triggered. Because I was talking to, this is kind of related to that, as Mike Batista, I interviewed on Cosmic, who is a Green Beret who came forward, and he was saying that the reason why he thinks he can make contact potentially is because the special forces are constantly tested with their parasympathetic nervous system. It's constantly turned on and off. They go from normal to fight or flight so much that it does something to your CNS, your central nervous system. And after that, he didn't have experiences really while he was in the service. It was kind of afterwards he had it, and then he got integrated into these programs, and he thinks that had something to do with it. So that's also trauma related, right? It's like maybe trauma is the wrong word. It's like triggering your nervous system, and like and there's different ways of doing that. One of them is just, yeah, crazy fear. I mean, it seems like fear is the easiest way, like trauma, like that's how you get yourself jacked up, and something about that process changes how you show up in the world. The other layer to it though is what's the doctor out of Stanford, Eric, no, not Eric Davis,
Gary
I forget
Nolan.
his. Yeah, Gary Nolan talked about how people, experiencers, all have this developed part of their brain called the caudate putamen. And I always wonder, like, that in combination with your nervous system is like the secret formula. Like if you have a developed caudate putamen and you have trauma, are you way more likely to make contact? Is kind of like an interesting theory.
Seeing that you're talking about these whistleblowers, the question I've always had is how would you at Gaia distinguish between whether this guy is a legitimate guy or whether he's trying to influence your massive audience to spin the story? Because I've always, since my first book in '89, we talked about this thing. I call it gradual disclosure, that they have these people who take information, put disinformation around it, they're putting it out, and they say, no, 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 I'm not doing that. And I've written 4 books, and the 5th book is now coming out or be coming out shortly on this. And it was the same idea that they're doing this stuff. In fact, I'm was a part of a program 2 years ago, and I can't talk about it because I don't know if it's still going on. It wasn't really me. I was just sort of sitting on the sidelines. I was allowed to watch, but I was going like they're doing it again. It was like we're from the government and we got this stuff we need to put out, and we're just disenchanted. And the thing is that this is, according to the Canadian government, this is the most highly classified subject in the United States. And my question would be, how do we determine if a whistleblower comes forward, whether we should phone the FBI and say this guy's violating his security clearance? Or how do you interpret how these guys are allowed to walk out and say, okay, I was part of the program. It's like if you were part of the atomic program and said, I'm working on the new nuclear missiles that they got on the Polaris submarines, and we got this many submarines and these many. You wouldn't let these guys walk around and talk. But how do you interpret that these guys are allowed to sort of all come out and sort of violate the security clearance, and that they made a promise that they would keep the security clearance, that they would never talk about it, and now they've violated, they've lied about that, and now they're coming forward. How do you distinguish as a senior producer at Gaia whether you're being taken for a ride or whether this is a legitimate witness?
Great question. Great question. A lot to say about that. So specifically for Cosmic, it is a platform to push things without hard evidence. So we do a basic amount of vetting on people, and then we give them. I'm not actually trying to push if they're real or not, but we are wary about like who comes on for sure, and we do a vetting background. That's one aspect of what's going on Cosmic. But what I've found in the people I've interviewed is it's not people in the program. It's people who got in for a day and then maybe got scared but didn't sign an NDA. Let me give you an example. Randy Anderson, I interviewed, a Green Beret who went to a facility in Indiana. They brought him down there, and it gets really deep in consciousness because like it seemed like they brought him down there on purpose because of his DNA to see if it would trigger a device underground. It was really crazy stuff that we got into with him related to the boogosphere and genetics and regressions and all this stuff. But Randy never signed an NDA. He just brought in for a day. Mike Carrera, I've interviewed. He happened to see this UFO in 2009 that looked like a reverse engineered one and then came forward about it. He never signed an NDA. They just kind of scared him. Mike Batista, he's not telling me stories from his military time. He's telling me about stuff that he did with Skywatcher and his own personal stuff after the fact. And you notice there's a theme there. They're all special forces, at least in my world, because that makes sense. Because special forces are brought in to handle these situations. It makes sense that they're the guys who know, and it makes sense the guys who didn't sign anything, who aren't super in the program, have started to come forward. I am talking to a guy that I hope I can get on camera. We got to verify him because there's a certain amount of verifying we have to do as a network. Like we don't try to just bring on anyone. We have to back it up a little bit. We're like, okay, you are a Green Beret. Your DD-214 is real. We have a network of people we know that check into this. And there's a certain point where we're like, okay, you are who you say you are. We can't prove your story, but there's a certain amount of vetting. So we do that. That does happen. But at a certain point, some people have said things on Cosmic where I don't know. It's too hard to prove. I don't think anyone's lying to me. And like when you get into remote viewing and like experience stuff, like it's tough. But the military guys in particular, when it comes to coming forward that I've dealt with, didn't sign NDAs. They're on the fringe. But we need the guys in the program to come forward. And the only way that's going to happen is if Congress allows them to come forward without consequences. And they're terrified because they won't do it. I mean, these people are behind the scenes saying stuff. I mean, some of those guys, you know, like when you get into Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis, I mean, they've made some significant statements and those guys were in the legacy program. Why are they getting away with it? I don't know. Is that part of controlled disclosure and they're allowed to say those things because they're pushing it along slowly? Are they part of the legacy program still? I don't know. That's where it gets weird. Like Lou Elizondo, I love everything he did since 2017 has opened this whole world up. But you have to, as anyone who's been in this space, like I love Lou, I want to interview him. I don't know though. Like it's a little weird. Like why are you allowed to talk about it? You know, why are you allowed to keep saying things, but you know more, but you won't tell me? And I get worried about psychological operations. You get into like, that's the ultimate psychological operation. You come forward that I was a part of a UFO program, but you can trust me because I was only in the one in the Pentagon. There's other deeper ones we found out about, but I can't tell you anything. It's like a trick in a lot of ways where you're like, wait, you're the authority now. You've tricked me into that, but you can't tell me everything. And there's more to know. Like, you know what I'm trying to say here? Like, it's like, I don't know. I'm just nervous. And by the way, I'm not saying Lou's a psychological operation operative. I don't know that. I'm as someone who grew up loving this stuff, I'm so nervous to believe anyone, you know? But the proof's in the pudding. That guy moved the needle. So whatever anyone wants to say about him, like we're in a better place today because of the 2017 New York Times article. But I think I kind of answered your question there.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just go with one related question and then go back to Desta so we keep it in sort of in a straight line here. Related to that, what do you think's actually going? What do you think the government actually has? Because I sit on the side where Valet said we got nothing. You got Bigelow has pulled out, and if there was money involved, if there was actual technology, Bigelow would not have pulled out. And Semi Van said he'd give a year of his salary pension salary as a bet to anybody who could prove that he says there's absolutely haven't got a clue. All the size stuff is right based on his 7 hour his briefing he got. All the size stuff is right, and they don't know anything about UFOs. They got bodies and crafts, but that doesn't mean they know what's going on. And James Ryder, the story about giving the craft. that Lockheed was going to dump their
Oh
craft to
yeah.
Bigelow.
Mhm.
And Ryder had said, we can't do anything with it. We got to pay all this money to store the thing, and we're willing to give it to you guys. And then, of course, it was blocked by the CIA and the U.S. Air Force. So where do you stand based upon the people you've got? Are we flying to the star system since 1970 like Linda House has, or do we have nothing, as Jim Semivan says?
Oh, I'm more towards we have everything because that's even a psychological operation too to be like, well, we have one, but we didn't figure it out. Like it's the same thing. Like there was an article just came out about like how they got to prepare for disclosure because, the bank in England was like, oh, we got to prepare for this in case something happens. It's just all a psychological negative operation to me. I can't prove it, Grant, but what I'm trying to say is like I like David Grush. Let's just go back to David Grush. Like he clearly said there's a long-standing legacy program, crash retrieval, reverse engineering, and disinformation campaign. And I just want to go always back to him. That guy handed President Obama the daily intelligence brief. He knows what he's talking about. He has over 40 witnesses. I know it's not hard evidence for the people out there, but that alone should make everyone look in the mirror and go, okay, this is real. Now, the nuance of whether we reverse engineered it or not, and we're going off planet, I think that's 100% real. I can't prove it to you in this conversation. I've talked to too many people on and off camera about it. Everybody's name I'd mention right now, half your audience would be like, that guy, you shouldn't listen to anything that guy says, or I believe him. Like Doty is one of them. I feel like Doty, who I love that guy, I've interviewed him a million times. His stories are wild. It's all about the latest things I talked to him about this program called the Kronos program, where they reverse engineered a craft and they're flying to different places in time and in space. And it sounds so sci-fi, but when you really get into like UFOs, when you really study it, you go, actually, that sounds more realistic than if you know what people are saying. Now, I can't prove it. If I had a bet on it though, if someone's like, do we have technology? Yes. Have we reverse engineered it to a point where we're using it actively all the time? I would say yes. I think that's definitely true. And I've talked to several people on and off camera who have directly said that, who have seen it. And we have multiple witnesses, high level witnesses who come forward about it. Everyone forgets about Philip Corso. Like that was a guy in the legacy program. Like everyone's like acts like that guy didn't exist now. But imagine he came out today, it'd be just as big as Grush or Jacob Barber, and he was actively taking information from these crash. Well, he was giving material to the aerospace companies. Yeah, this is all real. We even know in the age of disclosure, they talk about the hierarchy. The deputy director of science and technology runs it. And then he farms out, the Air Force does the crash retrieval. The Energy Department comes up with legal language, and they give it to the aerospace companies. Like multiple people on camera said that. Hal Puthoff's talked about the technology. He can't say everything yet, but I have a feeling that guy knows a lot more than he's saying. Now, I'm just going to stop this epic speech because I don't really have proof. I can't prove you in
No,
a
no.
conversation, but yes, yes. How about this? What's fair? Actually, this is fair. There's enough out there that we should be taking this so seriously and pushing until we know for sure. It is the biggest story out there. And if they're really harnessing technology, it can take us off world with free energy devices. And don't get me started in the medical stuff. We should know that immediately. Even if it's not true, there's enough information with enough people coming forward that that's all the media should be talking about until we have a final answer. But if you had a gun to my head, I would say 100% yes, we have technology and we're using it.
Are you trying to get Semivan on your show?
Oh, I'd love to have Semivan on Cosmic Disclosure.
Oh,
Yeah, I would love it. Some of those guys are a little more hesitant to come on Cosmic because of, in the past we've had some highly controversial figures, and that's what Cosmic's about. Like we're not journalism. We're not News
mhm.
Nation. We don't have to vet everybody. Like I'm going to listen to a guy who says he was on Mars fighting insectoid aliens, just because he had a background in the serious story. My job as a UFO advocate is just to push what's out there. Because as we know, 80 to 90% of it is all BS. Who am I to decide what is and isn't? Like we do our best to do background checks and then we tell stories. So I think sometimes some of those guys who are starting to get more of them will start coming on Cosmic when they realize that our heart is in the right place. And I would love to have Jimmy Samivan on. I would love to talk to him. I don't know how much more he would say though. You know what I mean? Like he's kind of said, that's the problem with some of these guys. Like they said everything they can say publicly. So if I bring him on Cosmic, it's not going to be new. And, but I
Well,
would love to
you
just
get to
because.
push him. You could ask him about the being that was behind him, because he's read all the mystical literature. He knows about spirit guides. He knows all that kind of stuff. And he'll say, "Yeah, I realize I may have agreed to this. That this event that I agreed to do this." Because the whole story was, if he hadn't, the question to him would be, if you hadn't had the experience, would you have pushed the New York Times article? Because he was the guy behind it. And behind Chris Bledsoe and the whole disclosure thing, he's the one that went to the three-letter agencies and said, "We're going to drop this thing. You guys can't do it. We're going to drop it." And that's when it all exploded, and get him to sort of admit that yeah, if he hadn't had the experience, he wouldn't have done disclosure. We would have no disclosure if that being had not been in the room. So he's an
Wow.
interesting guy. If you could push him a little bit on some of the weird, if you want questions, I'll give you some interesting questions because
No,
I've
please. That
listened
was
to everything
great.
he's
Yeah.
ever said, and he's a guy that will sort of go halfway, or he'll, as he said, he'll give a chicken shit answer, but he'll tell you he's going to give a chicken shit answer
At
to
least
your
he's honest
question.
about it.
But
Yeah, yeah.
his completely opposes to all what other people are saying, and he claims he had the 7 hour briefing just to get out of the briefing. What were you told in 7 hours inside the CIA about this kind of stuff? And why did you turn down the second briefing? And he said it was so strange. It was all consciousness and it was so weird. He walked around for 3 months with his head in the cloud and his wife is saying, "You okay?" And it's like, what did he actually get told? It was like unbelievable.
Yeah.
So anyway,
That's part
Desta,
of the
go ahead.
Oh
I
yeah,
got to
sorry. That's part of the
sidetrack
problem
you.
with disclosure is like it's so wild. There is a little bit of like soft disclosure or slow disclosure I agree with because that jump for most people is going to be so hard for them to go from there's ETs on a planet to like some vague like them materializing from another dimension potentially. There's also
Yeah.
probably two phenomenon going on potentially. One's ET, one's interdimensional, but there's also bleeding together. They have parallels. Like it's so weird and that's part of the issue, but we could totally overcome that. Like that's why I want to lean into spirituality and experiences more
Yeah.
because we got to prep the public for that. Anyway, sorry, Destin, you have a question?
Yeah, I guess
Desta, sorry, Desta.
yeah, since we're kind of on that line and still talking about age of disclosure, then maybe let's go to so the legacy program. There's talk that the legacy program slash what some people would call the Collins elite believes that the phenomena is not ET or interdimensional. They believe it is alien or sorry, angels or demons. So
Yeah.
what do you think from their perspective? Them like their maybe their religious backgrounds or whatever, why does some people think that it's angels and demons and some people are so sure it's aliens or interdimensionals?
Great question. I mean, it's the same words, right? It's just different lenses. They are angels. It literally, as I explained earlier, like some special forces people with close contact call them angels, even though it doesn't look like an angel. It's like in the Virginia case, it just kind of hit again with James Fox's work. Amazing. Listen to the doctor. He talks about it having an angelic presence in the room and that they could all feel it. And so they are angelic, but I personally wouldn't call them angels. I think that is a lens that we used for a long time in history that we called them because I mean, come me think about it, the Lady of Fatima incident, like they're UFO events, all right? A light comes down with a message, it's angelic, all that stuff. So they called it angels and put it through that lens, and that's what it became. And then modern times, we realized, like, wait, what's going on here? Is it spiritual or not? It's both. But the people in the Pentagon and the military who are saying that are probably just people who grew up super religious. And then they're probably being manipulated by the real legacy program people who are like, oh, you should be scared of that. Yeah, it's demonic. And you shouldn't mess with that. It's going to do something bad to you. It's all part of the fear porn propaganda coming from the legacy program. They're just confused. Anyone really in the program knows that's not what's going on. They know they're angelic, benevolent beings, and we just want to steal their technology and get everything we possibly can from them for our own selfish needs. Now, I'm not saying taking their tech is bad. I think we should, but that whole fear about them being angels and demons bothers me because that's just like it's just a word, it's just a lens. The interdimensional part is a whole different thing to me. That's where I'm foggy because if you look at like the experience of like Dorothy Izat, her case is fascinating because it seemed like she was encountering two different phenomenon. One was interdimensional, and that seemed to be the one that was more close to religion in a way. Like it was profound, it was angelic, it felt really beautiful. But then they'd also be like, hey, you want to see a UFO? We hang out with them sometimes. It's like they can see us better than you can. And the UFO would appear in the sky. And then both are there. And they're like, then I'm confused. I'm like, so are they separate or are they not? And that confusion can be harnessed by the legacy program to further confuse people, you know? And that's what they're doing. They're awesome. Whoever the psychologists are in this program, like, holy cow, like they are really good at their job. I mean, they're terrible human beings, but they're really, really good at confusing the hell out of us. Because I'm confused and I'm like reading everything. I'm like everything that comes out, I'm like listening to. I'm hyper obsessed. I'm still confused, you know? And that's the point. That's the point. But yeah, people out there like don't fear it. You can call it an angel, no problem with that, because they are kind of angelic. But to me, I don't use the word alien. That feels, it's funny. I say that, but sometimes in my videos online, I use the word alien just because it triggers people and people know what that means. They're people, they're extraterrestrials, they're beings. They're not aliens or angels. They're just highly conscious, highly evolved beings that could be millions of years ahead of us that are projecting pure love for the most part. That being said, there's probably bad aliens out there. There's probably bad somewhere. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but from all my research, I think that's mostly a bunch of fear porn.
There you go. I agree. If they're evil, then the question always comes down to, well, is it as evil as the good Eighth Air Force guys that dropped the atomic bomb on on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I mean, it doesn't get more evil than that. We say we're the good guys and these are the bad guys because they scare you standing beside your bed. So let me ask you a question. You talked about science and technology at CIA, and of course, you may know I've dealt with Ron Pandolfi for 25 or 30 years, major figure there. And he mistakenly put a video up on the internet, which I grabbed, where he talks. He's on a cruise going through the Panama Canal, and his wife says, "Footman, what do you think?" And he said, "People have always wondered what it's like to go into the next world. The next time John and the Sillison guy sitting beside him, there's been a breakthrough. The next time John goes to the desert, a number of us here will go into the next world and come back again." He never realized that would be grabbed by me. He always calls me the thief now because I got this video of him talking, and he never realized this would go a camera and him talking about portals. So what's your idea about portals?
Oh, good question too. That seems to be associated with this phenomenon because you get into how they travel, right? What do we mean by portals? Are we talking about a physical spot in the sky or the land you can walk through? I've heard a lot about that. Or are we talking about how they travel through wormholes? They seem to be harnessing something at the quantum level where they can just appear anywhere they want in the universe by going through a quote unquote portal. So I think it's kind of like two different things there. I don't have it feels like they could open portals because I was talking to Batista the other day, and it's like they opened a portal in his room. He walked through it to the craft. Is that a portal to another world? Technically, but not really. What you're saying is like a portal to another planet or a portal to another dimension. Is kind of what I think. What was the guy's name again? I forget his name. The
Uh,
video.
Pandolfi?
Pandolfi, that's right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
gotta watch that by the way. I've never seen that. So there's a lot of different ways of tackling that. I think it's all real. I think there's places in space and time that you can go through that get you other places. It's almost like a highway was built in the cosmos. I've heard this over and over again, where you can access these points in time and go other places. There's also portals to other dimensions potentially, where you literally walk to another world, which is I think more of what you're talking about, to another dimension, another reality. That is something I've heard over and over again through government programs and insiders that could be real, opening up a dimension. I mean, not even physical though. Like sometimes it's like to a place that doesn't, the rules of physics are different. And
Yeah.
I've heard this coming through Skunk Works and like these high tech underground facilities trying to open these places to other to other dimensions, which doesn't always sound like a good idea, honestly. Like because like Skinwalker Ranch, it looks like whatever happened there, they got things from a lower dimension, quote unquote demons, to come up and be negative, you know. So I think portals is a fascinating topic. I wish I had like a really good story or nugget of information for you, but I
Mhm.
think it's definitely one of the things we need to explore as a community.
Yeah, I think that's where ufology sort of missed the boat. Is like that was in my Desta and I put out the book, the UFO Sky Pilots, and that's what
Love
they
that book.
said that the being would say to them, "Where do you want to go?" And they'd say, "I'd like to go." The one guy, "I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance," and he said, "It is within you," almost like Stephen Greer says, the Sufi expression. You see yourself as a puny form when within you is enfolded the entire universe. So they say, "Go within yourself. When you can imagine it, we'll go there." And a number of people were told that. And they said it was like 1 second, and they're instantly exactly where they were supposed to be. And so you get the free survey that you talked about. You look at the free survey, 14% of people who answered the question said they'd flown the craft. And I talked to Ray Hernandez. I said, "Can we talk to these people? Like this seems to be pretty important. Like how do you move the craft? How do you because they're talking about the craft being alive. You become
Mhm.
one with the craft, you touch it, become one with the craft, and then you can go wherever you want instantaneously." And he said, "Well, people describe all sorts of stuff inside the ship." I said, "Yeah, but when they start talking about flying the ship, don't you think you should talk to these people?" And I couldn't get them to open up these witnesses. And that's a lot of people that, are claiming that they had this experience. And we're sort of missing it in terms of, counting, where UFOs are being seen, what color they are, and stuff like that. And the experiencer stuff that you've talked about a number of times is something that I think that we clearly miss in terms of some of the stuff they talk about, like somebody standing behind them, or they can see in 360 degrees. I mean, when you get like every third person saying that, and you've had the same thing in out of body experiences and near death experiences where you can see in 360 degrees, if you're going to tell a story to your skeptical wife, you're not going to put 360-degree vision in your story. That doesn't make any sense. And yet people are talking about this. And to me, that's the where we should be. And I think you've pushed that. So maybe talk a little bit about the experiencer aspect of the story that sort of ufology is sort of missing in terms of what this tells us.
Let me just start with how vindicated you are with your book, because like all these guys after your book came out started coming forward, Skywatcher and Mike Batista Herrera, about not just connecting with ETs in their craft, but even from the ground, not on the ship. The ETs seem to let you take the wheels. Like they're like, hey, teenager, you can drive the car. Check it out. You know, you did it. You connected with consciousness. So you've been so, dude, I thought when your book came out, this is like the leading edge of ufology. I was like, that stuff, because I've heard that before. I did a documentary on an experiencer who changed his rapping style from gangster rap to conscious rap because of experiences. I didn't put it in the doc because I don't know, I just didn't have space for it. But he has the experience of flying a ship just like you described, being in front of a control panel, not using his hands or not using his hands, someone behind him, but he couldn't see who it was, even though he has experience of seeing other beings. He couldn't remember who it was. That stuff is like the cutting edge of
Yeah.
ufology. It's also so bizarre, but also the most interesting thing. So back to your question about experiencers. Yeah, it is the only thing I'm fascinated with because that's where the information lies. We're not getting much from the government, right?
Yeah.
But we can get so much from the experiencers, and it gets into consciousness and the connection to the afterlife. And it's so fast. Like, what does Whitley talk about? How like he would know the event's going to happen because someone would see like a dead relative come out of the woods or something. Like
Yeah.
it's so fascinating and interesting. And I think we got to start pushing as a community to put them first instead of second. It's like we make all the military whistleblowers heroes, and they are, and I love them, and I talk to them, and
Yeah.
it's super important. But like, I am way more interested in authentic stories like Chris Bledsoe's and what it means and the depth behind it, and that's where we're going to get the answers. Because I feel like even if the government discloses, they're not going to go there right away. They're going to be like,
Yeah.
yeah, we have a craft from another world, whatever that means, another dimension, another planet. What are you saying? We have biologics, which is an interesting word. Is it
Yeah.
really a 3D biological being, or is it an avatar that they're using from another dimension? These are the questions we got to get into. The experiencers can help us with this,
Yeah.
but we have to be careful, Grant, because there's so many charlatans out there and so many people with one memory, and like it's great, but like it's hard to verify. So I think the goal going forward is to encourage more experiencers to come forward, because a lot don't because of the stigma. And one of my ultimate goals is just being ridiculously loud and just not caring at all and showing that like people out there believe you. Don't worry about the comments on the internet. No one cares. Those people are just victims of the legacy program. You got to look at it that way, you know, because other countries, they're not as bad about it. You know, and you go to Mexico, they're like, oh, yeah, you saw an alien? That's crazy. Yeah, they tell me about it. You know, here they don't. So, but back to like the experiencer thing and like why it's so important is because it's connected to who we are, our purpose on this planet, potentially some sort of magical, amazing reincarnation cycle thing where we don't just reincarnate as humans, we reincarnate as different species. That's also where this goes into. This is stuff I normally wouldn't say on podcasts
Yeah.
because it goes too far for the general public, but I feel like I'm in a safe space. So I'm
Yeah.
going to say it. I feel like your audience can take it. And that's where I want to go. And I think you guys do a great job of covering that. But we need like, you know, Ross Colhart is awesome. I'd love to see him bring on more non-military people with big stories like Chris again. I'd love to see the Jeremy Corbells of the world. And I get why they do that. I get why they're focused on nuts and bolts, but like even him, I feel like the guys with the big platforms are going to push more. Greer does a good job of that. Greer's great at that. He has no problem talking about it. But the more we do it together, the more we'll get the message out and the more people will be interested in it because the experiencers are where the stories are.
Yeah, because a lot of times we bring in. I used to have one of my best jobs was I was a bartender at the faculty club lounge. So I dealt with academics, presidents, vice presidents, deans, and stuff. And of course, a number of them, and this is back in the 70s, would sort of want to talk to me about UFOs. And the one guy used to argue with me all the time, and he was the dean of plant science. And at one point, I got frustrated. I said, "You're the dean of plant science. You know how to plant a rose. What the hell do you know about UFOs?" And he said, "Nothing."
Right?
Nothing. And that, we do that in ufology. We bring in a guy who's a plant scientist. He's got a PhD, and it's like the Rodney Dangerfield. Well, he's a PhD. He believes. So, we listen to this guy, and the guy knows nothing about what's going on. So
Right.
let's go back to Desta, who's actually, I think, flown the craft, and she's got these experiences and has quite a wild life that a lot of people really don't know. So go ahead, Desta.
Oh, please tell me, Desta.
Well,
I didn't know.
no,
Is your story in the book? Is your story in the Sky Pilot's book?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. I read it, so I forgot your name. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Well, I have a question for you. So I guess the question is, so why do you think the phenomena is reaching out to certain people? So we kind of talked about that it might be awakening something in them. You talked about that it might be because you have a mission. So it's like waking up your mission and now you feel like you have, this job to do. Some people, of course, have a little bit more of a negative story, but like, what do you think the phenomena, and we also talked about it being generational. right? So are they reaching out to specific families because of bloodlines or blood types or whatever? Or do you think they're reaching out to people who might be able to activate their mission and like be able to go share this with the world? Or what do you think? Who do you think they're reaching out to and for what specific purpose? Not, I know you don't know, but I mean, what's your theory?
Yeah, no, no, it's a great question. Two things. I think generally they're empowering the evolution of consciousness. It's kind of Gaia's core mission statement, and I don't say that just to plug Gaia. I say it because it feels like the entire phenomenon is pushing us forward and broadening our consciousness. And it doesn't have to start with the masses. You know, you can get into the 100 monkeys theory. You start with a smaller group of people, and then they'll naturally help open up people's consciousness. When you get into bloodlines and stuff, that's like it's murky. I'm not saying that's not real. It probably is. I don't know why they choose certain people over others. Did you ever read? Oh, there's a great book where we went into like the contact really seemed to happen like over 100 years ago in certain families, and then it spread out over and over. And like, so I don't know if it's like it could be literally just picking people out of like just randomly. You know, you can get into some markers about nationalities, blood types, and all these different things where it seems like that in bloodlines. I don't know that. I think the overall mission is easy to say that they're empowering our consciousness. It feels more like a large scale spiritual scientific study. These beings, when you get into experiencer stories, talk about being the shepherds of the universe and that they're shepherding and guiding intelligent life. It feels like we're God itself experiencing itself through a oneness consciousness. I'm going to get spiritual on you for a second. Like it's like a oneness. We are them. And whatever this universe is, like they're a part of us and they're helping us, they're helping themselves learn and grow through multiple lifetimes. It's so beautiful. It's so complex. We probably will never understand it until we pass, maybe on purpose, because we want to be cut off from it so you can feel pain, you can feel these things and grow from it. So overall, I think it's about expanding consciousness, evolving human consciousness, and it seems to be a large scale reincarnation scientific spiritual study. If I had to put a guess on it, don't hold me to that. I don't know, but that's what it feels like. But there's also probably ETs out there just flying by and just, you know, a couple million years advanced than us, looking at us. But there's something deeper going on. There's something more. And that's when you get into the interdimensional. That's why I'm confused. Because like I think there's ETs from other planets for sure. But then I'm like, but a lot of it feels different. It feels like angelic light beings coming from a different dimension. They take you into their astral form. They don't even do physical abductions. They can take you right out of your body. Like there's something deeper and more profound going on. And that's why I really feel like the phenomenon is positive and it's expanding our consciousness on purpose. And that's why also they don't fully reveal themselves yet. I think that's coming for sure. That's part of it. It's like getting us ready for that larger universe. It's one thing to be like, oh, there's ETs on another planet. There's another to be like, oh, they live in a different dimension and the reincarnation's real and they're guiding us through multiple lifetimes. Like good luck with the public with that, you know?
Okay, my last question, because Desta's got to zip off. I definitely going to be doing a second show. I want to talk to you a little bit more about Michael Newton and about your documentary that you did. And because you're talking about music, and Desta and I are about to put out a second music book, Music and the Paranormal. And that's the second one we've done on paranormal stuff. And we like these little
Cool.
stories about, it's almost like the musicians are the ones, well, that's Chris Blesso told me. That was the message he gave me. They want you to know the messages in the music. That's what Chris gave me, and we ended up doing a music book out of it. And now we're doing a second one, and now you bring up music with your documentary, and you
Yeah.
didn't put it in there, so we'd like to hear that story. But just as a sort of a side note, and then I'll if Dessa's got one more question, we'll go there. But you mentioned this whole deal about are we being picked? And again, we have to go back to I think to Michael Newton that when you look at Michael Newton, if we can maybe explain next time a little bit more about who this guy was and the 7,000 people that he regressed and what they found. But you had these ideas where the being when Chris Bledsoe was regressed in 2008. That's when O'Connell asked him, "So when did you first encounter the Guardians?" They were with me before I was born, like in
Yeah.
your last lifetime. Yes, and if they're in your last lifetime, we're in a different game. This ain't ET. This is a little more complex than ET
Right.
if they're in your last lifetime. And it's almost like the idea that if you look at the Michael Newton thing, that we had an agreement. You and I and Des had a meeting, and you're going to do this, we're going to do this, and everybody's got their little role. And the aliens, they're playing the aliens. Okay, next time we're going to play the aliens. And if you take Michael Newton's
Yeah.
7,000
Yeah.
witnesses, you start to see this pattern that really has not been touched by the UFO community. That sort of answers a lot of these questions. That a lot of the stuff may be planned. That we plan to do this, almost like the Dolores Cannon that's very well known in the UFO community, the three waves. And everybody says, what wave do you think you're in? The first, second, I don't give a shit what wave I'm in. Like, I'm here. I'm glad to be here. I'm in the game. Like, I
Yeah.
got to play the game. And you just, figure like you see miracle every day. You're just amazed by what you're seeing. So I hope we can talk a little bit more about stuff like the spiritual aspect, because that's where I say it is. I say when it comes, disclosure comes, it's not going to be the religious people jumping off the bridge. It's going to be the scientists who are going to be fighting over the cyanide pills, because they're suddenly going to realize they paid $60,000 a year to go to MIT, and you're telling me this is all bullshit? Yeah, it's all bullshit. And those are the guys. Those are the guys that are fighting it. The guys who have this worldview that they can't let go, because they trusted some guy who was a professor and he told them this. And when you go to university, because I was at university for 40 years, when you put it in, what you put on the test is not what you think is going on. It is, what does the professor want to hear? And you just repeat what the professor hears, and that's how these things get going through pattern after pattern, where people start to believe it like a religion, and they start defending it just because some guy told them back 20 years ago that this is the way it was. So Desta, if you got one more question, let's go there, and then no more questions.
They're
Oh,
self-defenders of the status quo is
Yeah.
like a great phrase I love. And they're also victims of the legacy program. And they also have the most to lose.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It's all about funding. The whole idea that, if you speak up now, they may not demote you, they may not pull your tenure like they tried to do with John Mack, but you're definitely not going to get a proposal. You're not going to be able to fund anything, because it's up against the people who are reviewing the magazines are the people who are in control. They're the high priests. And if you take a look, you can see I was just doing this yesterday in a manuscript I'm doing, that the National Academy of Sciences, only 10% are women. So the right brain stuff, there's only 10% women. 93% of them are atheists, do not believe in God, do not believe in paranormal phenomena and stuff like that. And you can see this thing, and it's again, it's all men. It's this left brain aspect that everything's a noun, everything's an accident and stuff like that. And that's where we're at. We're up against this thing where those are the guys that control the magazines, they edit the magazines. And even if you're right, you're never going to get it in a magazine. You're never going to get peer reviewed by these guys, because those aren't your peers. Those are the old. It's like going into religion and saying, I've got a new idea that this is wrong in the Roman Catholic Church, and taking it to the Vatican and expecting them to sit there and read the paper and change it. Nothing's going to happen. They're in control, and the people don't want to change. People are very reluctant to. They just repeat what they've been taught, and they come to believe it. As you're born in China, you're going to be believing in communism. If you're born in Russia, you're going to believe
Right.
that system. And we don't realize that we're influenced by what we've been brought up as a kid and through school, and that a lot of the stuff that we're learning now, that 100 years ago we don't believe any of that stuff anymore, and 100 years from now we won't believe half the stuff we're saying right now.
Exactly.
It's a
Yes.
process, and they're great. That's what the theory of wow is, that they just want you to realize there's something weird going on, and then you and I and Desta start scrambling around and reading books and try to figure out what it is, and they move you, almost like Einstein said. Mystery is at the core, is at the fundamental of all science and creativity. And see, if unless you have awe and curiosity, you're not going to do anything. But when you get sucked into it and you're trying to figure this problem out, that's what they're moving us down the road, to realize this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and to move us down the road. So I'm really appreciative of you, and for Gaia, for the getting the big audience you have. And I just hope you can get Jim Semivan on there. And I would
Me
send you
too.
some questions, and hopefully everybody gets on board and starts to realize that the world is not a nuts and bolts world the way people think it is. It's a little more complex. It's a little more grand than what you think it is, and that Gaia is at the leading edge of trying to answer this question and getting the message out, which is what it is. It's this raising of consciousness from one step to another, that we're not going to solve it, but as we go on, like, people don't think we've made any progress. I said, yeah, we absolutely have. If you take a
Yes.
look, you can go to China, you can go anywhere in the world and say Area 51. I know what that is. Skinwalker Ranch. I know what that is. And that's the thing. We don't realize that these ideas are near-death experiences. All this stuff is getting into the zeitgeist, and it's moving up, and more people believe it. And as Max Planck says, you do not convince your opponent he's wrong by showing him evidence. It happens when he dies. One
Right.
funeral at a time, the science advances, and that's what happens. The new generation is not offended with the idea. That's what he said. So that's what's going to happen. We throw the stones in the pond, and eventually the kids come along and they realize that this is not a threat, and they change, and it gets taught in school, and the consciousness rises. And I agree with you. That's exactly what they're doing. They're moving us along the road. They're awakening us to realize, but they're not doing it left brain. They're not coming in and giving a lecture. They're giving you little clues, little breadcrumbs that get you all interested in, and you're trying to figure out it's a mystery, and everybody loves a mystery, and everybody's trying to figure it out, and that's what they're doing. And then the government, I think, has done the same sort of pattern. They're copying the aliens, so they're leaking little pieces, and they're not giving you the whole answer, and everybody's sort of scrambling. But we're making progress, I think.
Oh, absolutely. We're definitely making progress. It's clear if I've been in this my whole life, especially since 2017 to today, there's been a
Yeah.
lot of progress, at least with awareness. As for the spiritual side, we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. 75. I tell people, number one rule, I've been in for 50 years. Number one rule is what happened in 75. None of that stuff happens now. None of it. It's completely different world. The aliens are changing the phenomena. They keep changing this, do this. Now we'll do this. We'll do
Oh
crop
yeah,
circles.
we
Now
can
we'll
get into
do
that too.
landing
Like,
traces.
why did it look different over the last 70 years? Why does it seem like by decade almost they changed the way they look? Why were they mostly human looking back in the day, and now they're
Yeah.
it's there's a lot going on there that's like so fascinating. I could go on forever about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really appreciate you being on. I'm amazed. You're one of the few people that knows all the aspects, knows the consciousness aspect, how it fits together. You know about the free survey. A lot of times you can talk about the free survey. People don't even know what you're talking about. 4,200 experiencers and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I
I'm
saw you
glad that
guys
we
light
got
up when I brought it
this.
up.
You got to educate the audience that we have, and definitely let's do it again.
Oh, please, Grant, this was a pleasure. I love talking to like-minded people. Your works inspire me. You're part of the reason why I talk about these topics. So thank you so
Be-
much for having me on. Desta, it
Beautiful.
was a
Thank you.
pleasure to talk to you as well.
And thank you, Desta, for
Thanks, Paul.
joining us and educating us because she's, as I said, she's one of the people that's actually read all the books. She's got a big, massive book collection. She actually reads the books, which most people don't do. They just get them signed by authors and then they put them on the shelf. Okay.
That's funny.
Thanks a lot. And we'll talk again by email.
Thanks, guys.
And
Thanks, guys.
thank you to everybody for taking time to listen.